The Legend of the Bleeding Heart by Annie Fellows Johnston. This is a Librivox recording. All Librivox recordings are in the public domain. For more information, or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. In days of old, when all things in the wood had speech, there lived within its depths a lone flax spinner. She was a bent old creature, and ill to look upon, but all the tongues of all the forest leaves were ever kept a-wagging with the story of her kindly deeds. And even to this day they sometimes whisper low among themselves, because they fain would hold in mind so sweet a tale, the story of her kindness to the little orphan Olga. 'Twas no slight task the old flax spinner took upon herself, the day she brought the helpless child to share the shelter of her thatch. The oak outside her door held up his arms in solemn protest. "Thou dost but waste thyself," he said. "Thy benefits will be forgot, thy labours unrequited, for youth is ever but another title for ingratitude."
"Nay, friend," the old flax spinner said, "my little Olga will not be ungrateful and forgetful."
All hedged about with loving care, the orphan grew to gracious maidenhood, and felt no lack of father, mother, brother, or sister. In every way the old flax spinner took their places, but many were the sacrifices that she made to keep her fed and warmly clad, and every time she went without herself that Olga might receive a greater share, Wiseacre Oak looked down and frowned and shook his head. Then would the old dame hasten to her inner room, and there she pricked herself with her spindle, until a great red drop of her heart's blood fell into her trembling hand. With witchery of words she blew upon it, and rolled it in her palm, and muttering, turned and turned and turned it, and as the spell was laid upon it, it shriveled into a tiny round ball like a seed, and she strung it on a thread, where were many others like it, saying,
"By this she will remember, she will not be ungrateful and forgetful."
So years went by, and Olga grew in goodness and in beauty, and helped the old flax spinner in her tasks, as blithely and as willingly as if she were indeed her daughter. Every morning she brought water from the spring, gathered the wild fruits of the woods, and spread the linen on the grass to bleach. At such times would the bent old foster-mother hold herself erect, and call up to the oak,
"Dost see? Thou'rt wrong. Youth is not another title for ingratitude."
"Thou hast not lived as long as I," would be the only answer. One day, as Olga was wandering by the spring, searching for watercresses, the young prince of the castle rode by on his prancing charger. A snow-white plume waved in his hat, and a shining silver bugle hung from his shoulder, for he had been following the chase. He was thirsty and tired, and asked for a drink, but there was no cup with which to dip the water from the spring. But Olga caught the drops as they bubbled out from the spring, holding them in the hollow of her beautiful white hands, and reaching up to where he sat, offered him the sparkling water. So gracefully was it done that the prince was charmed by her modest manner, as well as her lovely face, and baring his head when he had slaked his thirst, he touched the white hands with his lips. Before he rode away, he asked her name and where she lived. The next day, a courier in scarlet and gold stopped at the door of the cottage, and invited Olga to the castle. Princesses and royal ladies from all over the realm were to be entertained there 7 days and 7 nights. Every night a grand ball was to be given, and Olga was summoned to each of the balls. It was because of her pleasing manner and her great beauty that she had been bidden. The old flax spinner curtsied low to the courier, and promised that Olga should be at the castle without fail.
"But, good dame," cried Olga when the courier had gone, "prithee tell me why thou didst make such a promise, knowing full well this gown of tow is all I own. Wouldst have me stand before the prince in beggar's garb? Better to bide at home for aye than be put to shame before such guests." "Have done, my child," the old dame said. "Thou shalt wear a court robe of the finest. Years have I toiled to have it ready, but that is not. I love thee as my own."
Then once more the old flax spinner went into her inner room, and pricked herself with her spindle till another great red drop of her heart's blood fell into her trembling hand. With witchery of words she blew upon it, and rolled it in her palm, and muttering, turned and turned and turned it. And as the spell was laid upon it, it shriveled into a tiny round ball like a seed, and she strung it on a thread, where were many others like it. 70 times 7 was the number of beads on this strange rosary. When the night of the first ball rolled around, Olga combed her long golden hair and twined it with a wreath of snowy water lilies, and then she stood before the old dame in her dress of tow. To her wonderment and grief, she saw there was no silken robe in waiting, only a string of beads to clasp around her white throat. Each bead in the necklace was like a little shriveled seed, and Olga's eyes filled with tears of disappointment.
"Obey me, and all will be well," said the old woman. "When thou reachest the castle gate, clasp one bead in thy fingers and say, 'For love's sweet sake, in my hour of need, blossom and deck me, little seed.' Straightway right royally shalt thou be clad, but remember carefully the charm. Only to the magic words, 'For love's sweet sake,' will the necklace give up its treasures. If thou shouldst forget, then thou must be doomed always to wear thy gown of tow."
So Olga sped on her moonlighted way through the forest, until she came to the castle gate. There she paused, and grasping a bead of the strange necklace between her fingers, repeated the old dame's charm.
"For love's sweet sake, in my hour of need, blossom and deck me, little seed."
Immediately the bead burst, with a little puff, as if a seed pod had snapped asunder. A faint perfume surrounded her, rare and subtle, as if it had been blown across from some flower of Eden. Olga looked down, and found herself enveloped in a robe of such delicate texture that it seemed soft as a rose leaf and as airy as pink clouds that sometimes float across the sunset. The water lilies in her hair had become a coronal of opals. When she entered the great ballroom, the prince of the castle started up from his throne in amazement. Never before had he seen such a vision of loveliness.
"Surely," said he, "some rose of paradise hath found a soul, and drifted earthward to blossom here."
And all that night he had eyes for none but her. The next night Olga started again to the castle in her dress of tow, and at the gate she grasped the second bead in her fingers, repeating the charm. This time the pale yellow of the daffodils seemed to have woven itself into a cloth of gold for her adorning. It was like a shimmer of moonbeams, and her hair held the diamond flashings of 100 tiny stars. That night the prince paid her so many compliments, and singled her out so often to bestow his favors, that Olga's head was turned. She tossed it proudly, and quite scorned the thought of the humble cottage which had given her shelter so long. The next day, when she had returned to her gown of tow and was no longer a haughty court lady, but only Olga, the flax spinner's maiden, she repined at her lot. Frowning, she carried the water from the spring. Frowning, she gathered the cresses and plucked the woodland fruit. And then she sat all day by the spring, refusing to spread the linen on the grass to bleach. She was discontented with the old life of toil, and pouted crossly because duties called her, when she wanted to do nothing but sit idly dreaming of the gay court scenes in which she had taken a bright, brief part. The old flax spinner's fingers trembled as she spun, when she saw the frowns, for she had given of her heart's blood to buy happiness for this maiden she loved, and well she knew there can be no happiness where frowns abide. She felt that her years of sacrifice had been in vain, but when the oak wagged his head, she called back waveringly, "My little Olga will not be ungrateful and forgetful." That night outside the castle gate, Olga paused. She had forgotten the charm. The day's discontent had darkened her memory as storm clouds darken the sky. But she grasped her necklace imperiously. "Deck me at once," she cried in a haughty tone.
Clothe me more beautifully than mortal maid was ever clad before, so that I may find favour in the prince's sight, and become the bride of the castle. I would that I were done forever with the spindle and the distaff."
But the moon went under a cloud, and the wind began to moan around the turrets. The black nighthawks in the forest flapped their wings warningly, and the black bats flitted low around her head.
"Obey me at once,"
she cried angrily, stamping her foot and jerking at the necklace. But the string broke, and the beads went rolling away in the darkness in every direction and were lost, all but one, which she clasped in her hand. Then Olga wept at the castle gate, wept outside in the night and the darkness, in her peasant's garb of tow. But after a while, through her sobbing, stole the answering sob of the night wind. "Hush," it seemed to say. "Shh, shh. Never a heart can come to harm, if the lips but speak the old dame's charm." The voice of the night wind sounded so much like the voice of the old flax spinner that Olga was startled and looked around wonderingly. Then suddenly she seemed to see the thatched cottage and the bent form of the lonely old woman at the wheel. All the years in which the good dame had befriended her seemed to rise up in a row, and out of each one called 1,000 kindnesses as with one voice. "How canst thou forget us, Olga? We were done for love's sweet sake, and that alone." Then was Olga sorry and ashamed that she had been so proud and forgetful, and she wept again. The tears seemed to clear her vision, for now she saw plainly that through no power of her own could she wrest strange favours from fortune. Only the power of the old charm could make them hers. She remembered it then, and holding fast the one bead in her hand, she repeated humbly, "For love's sweet sake in my hour of need, blossom and deck me, little seed." Lo, as the words left her lips, the moon shone out from behind the clouds above the dark forest. There was a fragrance of lilies all about, and a gossamer gown floated around her, whiter than the whiteness of the fairest lily. It was fine like the finest lace the frost elves weave, and softer than the softest ermine of the snow. On her long golden hair gleamed a coronet of pearls. So beautiful, so dazzling was she as she entered the castle door, that the prince came down to meet her, and kneeling, kissed her hand and claimed her as his bride. Then came the bishop in his mitre, and led her to the throne, and before them all the flax spinner's maiden was married to the prince, and made the Princess Olga. Then, until the 7 days and 7 nights were done, the revels lasted in the castle, and in the merriment the old flax spinner was again forgotten. Her kindness of the past, her loneliness in the present, had no part in the thoughts of the Princess Olga. All night the old oak, tapping on the thatch, called down, "Thou'rt forgotten! Thou'rt forgotten!" But the beads that had rolled away in the darkness buried themselves in the earth and took root, and sprang up, as the old woman knew they would do. There at the castle gate they bloomed, a strange, strange flower, for on every stem hung a row of little bleeding hearts. One day the Princess Olga, seeing them from her window, went down to them in wonderment. "What do you here?" she cried, for in her forest life she'd learned all speech of bird and beast and plant. "We bloom for love's sweet sake," they answered. "We have sprung from the old flax spinner's gift. The necklace thou didst break and scatter. From her heart's best blood she gave it, and her heart still bleeds to think she is forgotten." Then they began to tell the story of the old dame's sacrifices, all the 70 times 7 that she had made for the sake of the maiden, and Olga grieved as she listened, that she could have been so ungrateful. Then she brought the prince to hear the story of the strange, strange flowers, and when he had heard, together they went to the lowly cottage, and fetched the old flax spinner to the castle, there to live out all her days in ease and contentment. "See now," she whispered to the oak at parting, but sturdily he held his ground, persisting, Thou wouldst have been forgotten, save for that miracle of bloom. And still the flower they call Bleeding Heart blooms on by cottage walls and castle gardens, to waken all the world to grateful memories. And ever it doth bring to mind the lonely hearts that bleed because they are forgotten, and all they sacrificed for love's sweet sake to give us happiness. End of The Legend of the Bleeding Heart by Annie Fellows Johnston. Read by Stephen Fellows.
The Buckle My Shoe Picture Book
by Walter Crean. This is a Librivox recording. All Librivox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit librivox.org. Recording by Chad Horner. Preface. Well, I must buckle to, and put a good preface on the matter, as I have to introduce the latest addition to the already considerable family of Crean reprints. Here we have those delightful rigmaroles, 1, 2, Buckle My Shoe, and A Gaping Wide-Mouthed Waddling Frog. But what, it may be asked, is my mother doing in such company? I shrewdly suspect, if we knew the truth, that she is really the author of both. It is probable, however, that both legends have been transmitted through a long line of mothers, assisted perhaps by nurses, but I had them direct from my mother. A pleasing romance of domestic incident runs through 1, 2, Buckle My Shoe, while the Waddling Frog shows a rich and sumptuous imagination, if a little inconsequent, except numerically. But if he sets us agape with astonishment, his own wide mouth seems capacious enough to swallow all the marvels by land or sea which he enumerates. These two are quite early Creans, almost prehistoric. Please notice, however, the up-to-date editions. My mother is mid-Victorian, just after crinolines had gone out. But mothers are always in fashion, bless them. And you also, dear children, whether of the old or the new world, who, having chosen your parents wisely, have become possessors of this book. May your shoes never want buckling, and if by any mischance you should lose one, may good luck always find a spare one for you, and so set you on your feet again. Kensington, June 1910. 1, 2, Buckle My Shoe. 3, 4, Open the door. 5, 6, Pick up sticks. 7, 8, Lay them straight. 9, 10, A good fat hen. 11, 12, Ring the bell. 13, 14, Maids are courting. 15, 16, Maids are in the kitchen. 17, 18, Maids in waiting. 19, 20, My plate is empty. A gaping wide-mouthed waddling frog. A gaping wide-mouthed waddling frog. 2 pudding's ends would choke a dog, or a gaping wide-mouthed waddling frog. 3 monkeys tied to a log. 2 pudding's ends would choke a dog, or a gaping wide-mouthed waddling frog. 4 puppies with our dog ball, who daily for their breakfast call. 3 monkeys tied to a log. 2 pudding's ends would choke a dog, or a gaping wide-mouthed waddling frog. 5 beetles against the wall, close to an old woman's apple stall. 4 puppies with our dog ball, who daily for their breakfast call. 3 monkeys tied to a log. 2 pudding's ends would choke a dog, or a gaping wide-mouthed waddling frog. 6 joiners in joiners' hall, working with their tools and all. 5 beetles against the wall, close to an old woman's apple stall. 4 puppies with our dog ball, who daily for their breakfast call. 3 monkeys tied to a log. 2 pudding's ends would choke a dog, or a gaping wide-mouthed waddling frog. 7 lobsters in a dish, as fresh as any heart could wish. 6 joiners in joiners' hall, working with their tools and all. 5 beetles against the wall, close to an old woman's apple stall. 4 puppies with our dog ball, who daily with their breakfast call. 3 monkeys tied to a log. 2 pudding's ends would choke a dog, or a gaping wide-mouthed waddling frog. 8 peacocks in the air, I wonder how they all got there. You don't know, and I don't care. 7 lobsters in a dish, as fresh as any heart could wish. 6 joiners in joiners' hall, working with their tools and all. 5 beetles against the wall, close to an old woman's apple stall. 4 puppies with our dog ball, who daily for their breakfast call. 3 monkeys tied to a log, 2 pudding's ends would choke a dog, or a gaping, wide-mouthed, waddling frog. 9 ships sailing on the main, some bound for France and some for Spain. I wish them all safe back again. 8 peacocks in the air, I wonder how they all got there. You don't know and I don't care. 7 lobsters in a dish, as fresh as any heart could wish. 6 joiners in Joiner's Hall, working with their tools and all. 5 beetles against the wall, close to an old woman's apple stall. 4 puppies with our dog Ball, who daily for their breakfast call. 3 monkeys tied to a log, 2 pudding's ends would choke a dog, or a gaping, wide-mouthed, waddling frog. My mother, who fed me from her gentle breast, and hushed me in her arms to rest, and on my cheek sweet kisses pressed. My mother, when sleep forsook my open eye, who was at snug sweet hush-a-bye, and rocked me that I should not cry. My mother, who sat and watched my infant head when sleeping in my cradle bed, and tears of sweet affection shed. My mother, when pain and sickness made me cry, who gazed upon my heavy eye, and wept for fear that I should die. My mother, who dressed my doll in clothes so gay, and taught me pretty how to play, and minded all I had to say. My mother, who taught my infant lips to pray, and love God's holy book and day, and walk in wisdom's pleasant way. My mother, and can I ever cease to be affectionate and kind to thee, who was so very kind to me? My mother, ah no, I thought I cannot bear, and if God please my life to spare, I hope I shall reward thy care. My mother, who ran to help me when I fail, and would some pretty story tell, or kiss the place to make it well. My mother, when thou art feeble, old and grey, my healthy arms shall be thy stay, and I will soothe thy pains away. My mother, and when I see thee hang thy head, 'twill be my turn to watch thy bed, and tears of sweet affection shed. My mother, for God who loves above the skies would look with vengeance in his eyes if I should ever dare despise. My mother. End of The Buckle My Shoe Picture Book by Walter Crane.
The Christmas Masquerade by Mary Eleanor Wilkins. This is a Librivox recording. All Librivox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The Christmas Masquerade. On Christmas Eve, the mayor's stately mansion presented a beautiful appearance. There were rows of different-colored wax candles burning in every window, and beyond them one could see the chandeliers of gold and crystal blazing with light. The fiddles were squeaking merrily, and lovely little forms flew past the windows in time to the music. There were gorgeous carpets laid from the door to the street, and carriages were constantly arriving and fresh guests tripping over them. They were all children. The mayor was giving a Christmas masquerade tonight to all the children in the city, the poor as well as the rich. The preparation for this ball had been making an immense sensation for the last 3 months. Placards had been up in the most conspicuous points in the city, and all the daily newspapers had at least a column devoted to it, headed with "The Mayor's Christmas Masquerade" in very large letters. The mayor had promised to defray the expenses of all the poor children whose parents were unable to do so, and the bills for their costumes were directed to be sent in to him. Of course, there was a great deal of excitement among the regular costumers of the city, and they all resolved to vie with one another in being the most popular and the best patronized on this gala occasion. But the placards and the notices had not been out a week before a new costumer appeared who cast all the others into the shade directly. He set up his shop on the corner of one of the principal streets and hung up his beautiful costumes in the windows. He was a little fellow, not much larger than a boy of 10. His cheeks were as red as roses, and he had on a long curling wig as white as snow. He wore a suit of crimson velvet knee breeches and a little swallow-tailed coat with beautiful golden buttons. Deep lace ruffles fell over his slender white hands, and he wore elegant knee buckles of glittering stones. He sat on a high stool behind his counter and served his customers himself. He kept no clerk. It did not take the children long to discover what beautiful things he had and how superior he was to the other costumers, and they began to flock to his shop immediately, from the mayor's daughter to the poor ragpickers. The children were to select their own costumes. The mayor had stipulated that. It was to be a children's ball in every sense of the word. So they decided to be fairies and shepherdesses and princesses according to their own fancies, and this new costumer had charming costumes to suit them. It was noticeable that for the most part the children of the rich, who had always had everything they desired, would choose the parts of goose girls and peasants and such like, and the poor children jumped eagerly at the chance of being princesses or fairies for a few hours in their miserable lives. When Christmas Eve came and the children flocked into the mayor's mansion, whether it was owing to the costumer's art or their own adaptation to the characters they had chosen, it was wonderful how lifelike their representations were. Those little fairies in their short skirts of silk and gauze, in which golden sparkles appeared as they moved, with their little funny gossamer wings, like butterflies, looked like real fairies. It did not seem possible when they floated around to the music, half supported on the tips of their dainty toes, half by their filmy purple wings, their delicate bodies swaying in time, that they could be anything but fairies. It seemed absurd to imagine that they were Johnny Mullins, the washwoman's son, and Polly Flinders, the charwoman's little girl, and so on. The mayor's daughter, who had chosen the character of a goose girl, looked so like a true one that one could hardly dream she ever was anything else. She was ordinarily a slender, dainty little lady, rather tall for her age. She now looked very short and stubbed and brown, just as if she had been accustomed to tend geese in all sorts of weather. It was so with all the others, the Red Riding Hoods, the princesses, the Bo Peeps, and with every one of the characters who came to the mayor's ball. Red Riding Hood looked round with big, frightened eyes, all ready to spy the wolf, and carried her little pat of butter and pot of honey gingerly in her basket. Bo Peep's eyes looked red with weeping for the loss of her sheep, and the princesses swept about so grandly in their splendid brocaded trains and held their crowned heads so high that people half believed them to be true princesses. But there never was anything like the fun at the mayor's Christmas ball. The fiddlers fiddled and fiddled, and the children danced and danced on the beautiful waxed floors. The mayor, with his family and a few grand guests, sat on a dais covered with blue velvet at one end of the dancing hall and watched the sport. They were all delighted. The mayor's eldest daughter sat in front and clapped her little soft white hands. She was a tall, beautiful young maiden, and wore a white dress and a little cap woven of blue violets on her yellow hair. Her name was Violetta. The supper was served at midnight, and such a supper! The mountains of pink and white ices, and the cakes with sugar castles and flower gardens on the tops of them, and the charming shapes of gold and ruby-colored jellies. There were wonderful bonbons, which even the mayor's daughter did not have every day, and all sorts of fruits, fresh and candied. They had cowslip wine in green glasses and elderberry wine in red, and they drank each other's health. The glasses held a thimbleful each. The mayor's wife thought that was all the wine they ought to have. Under each child's plate there was a pretty present, and everyone had a basket of bonbons and cake to carry home. At 4 o'clock the fiddlers put up their fiddles and the children went home, fairies and shepherdesses and pages and princesses, all jabbering gleefully about the splendid time they had had. But in a short time what consternation there was throughout the city! When the proud and fond parents attempted to unbutton their children's dresses in order to prepare them for bed, not a single costume would come off. The buttons buttoned again as fast as they were unbuttoned. Even if they pulled out a pin, in it would slip again in a twinkling. And when a string was untied, it tied itself up again into a bow knot. The parents were dreadfully frightened, but the children were so tired out they finally let them go to bed in their fancy costumes and thought perhaps they would come off better in the morning. So Red Riding Hood went to bed in her little red cloak, holding fast to her basket full of dainties for her grandmother, and Bo Peep slept with her crook in her hand. The children all went to bed readily enough, they were so very tired, even though they had to go in this strange array. All but the fairies. They danced and pirouetted and would not be still. "We want to swing on the blades of grass," they kept saying, "and play hide and seek in the lily cups, and take a nap between the leaves of the roses." The poor charwomen and coal heavers, whose children the fairies were, for the most part, stared at them in great distress. They did not know what to do with these radiant, frisky little creatures into which their Johnnies and their Pollies and Betsies were so suddenly transformed. But the fairies went to bed quietly enough when daylight came, and were soon fast asleep. There was no further trouble till 12 o'clock, when all the children woke up. Then a great wave of alarm spread over the city. Not one of the costumes would come off then. The buttons buttoned as fast as they were unbuttoned, the pins quilted themselves in as fast as they were pulled out, and the strings flew round like lightning and twisted themselves into bownuts as fast as they were untied. And that was not the worst of it. Every one of the children seemed to have become, in reality, the character which he or she had assumed. The mayor's daughter declared she was going to tend her geese out in the pasture, and the shepherdesses sprang out of their little beds of down, throwing aside their silken quilts, and cried that they must go out and watch their sheep. The princesses jumped up from their straw pallets and wanted to go to court, and all the rest of them likewise. Poor little Red Riding Hood sobbed and sobbed because she couldn't go and carry her basket to her grandmother. And as she didn't have any grandmother, she couldn't go, of course, and her parents were very much troubled. It was all so mysterious and dreadful. The news spread very rapidly over the city, and soon a great crowd gathered around the new costumer's shop, for everyone thought he must be responsible for all this mischief. The shop door was locked, but they soon battered it down with stones. When they rushed in, the costumer was not there. He had disappeared with all his wares. Then they did not know what to do, but it was evident that they must do something before long, for the state of affairs was growing worse and worse. The mayor's little daughter braced her back up against the tapestried wall and planted her 2 feet in their thick shoes firmly. "I will go and tend my geese," she kept crying. "I won't eat my breakfast. I won't go out in the park. I won't go to school. I'm going to tend my geese. I will, I will, I will." And the princesses trailed their rich trains over the rough, unpainted floors in their parents' poor little huts, and held their crowned heads very high, and demanded to be taken to court. The princesses were mostly geese girls when they were their proper selves, and their geese were suffering, and their poor parents did not know what they were going to do, and they wrung their hands and wept as they gazed on their gorgeously apparelled children. Finally, the mayor called a meeting of the aldermen, and they all assembled in the city hall. Nearly every one of them had a son or a daughter who was a chimney sweep or a little watch girl or a shepherdess. They appointed a chairman, and they took a great many votes, and contrary votes, but they did not agree on anything, until someone proposed that they consult the wise woman. Then they all held up their hands and voted too unanimously. So the whole board of aldermen set out, walking by twos, with the mayor at their head, to consult the wise woman. The aldermen were all very fleshy, and carried gold-headed canes which they swung very high at every step. They held their heads well back and their chins stiff, and whenever they met common people, they sniffed gently. They were very imposing. The wise woman lived in a little hut on the outskirts of the city. She kept a black cat. Except for her, she was all alone. She was very old, and had brought up a great many children. and she was considered remarkably wise. But when the alderman reached her hut and found her seated by the fire, holding her black cat, a new difficulty presented itself. She had always been quite deaf, and people had been obliged to scream as loud as they could in order to make her hear. But lately she had grown much deafer, and when the alderman attempted to lay the case before her, she could not hear a word. In fact, she was so very deaf that she could not distinguish a tone below G sharp. The aldermen screamed till they were quite red in their faces, but all to no purpose. None of them could get up to G sharp, of course. So the aldermen all went back, swinging their gold-headed canes, and they had another meeting in the city hall. Then they decided to send the highest soprano singer in the church choir to the wise woman. She could sing up to G sharp just as easy as not. So the high soprano singer set out for the wise woman's in the mayor's coach, and the aldermen marched behind, swinging their gold-headed canes. The high soprano singer put her head down close to the wise woman's ear, and sang all about the Christmas Masquerade and the dreadful dilemma everybody was in G sharp. She even went higher sometimes, and the wise woman heard every word. She nodded 3 times, and every time she nodded, she looked wiser. "Go home and give them a spoonful of castor oil all round," she piped up. Then she took a pinch of snuff and wouldn't say any more. So the aldermen went home, and each one took a district and marched through it with a servant carrying an immense bowl and spoon, and every child had to take a dose of castor oil. But it didn't do a bit of good. The children cried and struggled when they were forced to take the castor oil, but 2 minutes afterward the chimney sweeps were crying for their brooms, and the princesses screaming because they couldn't go to court, and the mayor's daughter, who had been given a double dose, cried louder and more sturdily. "I want to go and tend my geese. I will go and tend my geese." So the aldermen took the high soprano singer, and they consulted the wise woman again. She was taking a nap this time, and the singer had to sing up to B flat before she could wake her. Then she was very cross, and the black cat put up his back and spit at the alderman. "Give them a spanking all round," she snapped out. "And if that don't work, put them to bed without their supper." Then the alderman marched back to try that, and all the children in the city were spanked. And when that didn't do any good, they were put to bed without any supper. But the next morning, when they woke up, they were worse than ever. The mayor and the aldermen were very indignant and considered that they had been imposed upon and insulted, so they set out for the wise woman's again with the high soprano singer. She sang in G sharp how the alderman and the mayor considered her an impostor, and did not think she was wise at all, and they wished her to take her black cat and move beyond the limits of the city. She sang it beautifully. It sounded like the very finest Italian opera music. "Dearie me," piped the wise woman when she had finished. "How very grand these gentlemen are." Her black cat put up his back and spit. 5 times 1 black cat are 5 black cats, said the wise woman, and directly there were 5 black cats spitting and meowling. 5 times 5 black cats are 25 black cats. And then there were 25 of the angry little beasts. 5 times 25 black cats are 125 black cats, added the wise woman with a chuckle. Then the mayor and the alderman and the high soprano singer fled precipitately out the door and back to the city. 125 black cats had seemed to fill the wise woman's hut full, and when they all spit and meowed together, it was dreadful. The visitors could not wait for her to multiply black cats any longer. As winter wore on and spring came, the condition of things grew more intolerable. Physicians had been consulted, who advised that the children should be allowed to follow their own bents, for fear of injury to their constitutions. So the rich aldermen's daughters were actually out in the fields herding sheep, and their sons sweeping chimneys or carrying newspapers, while the poor charwomen's and coal-heavers' children spent their time like princesses and fairies. Such a topsy-turvy state of society was shocking. Why, the mayor's little daughter was tending geese out in the meadow like any common goose girl. Her pretty elder sister Violetta felt very sad about it, and used often to cast about in her mind for some way of relief. When cherries were ripe in spring, Violetta thought she would ask the cherryman about it. She thought the cherryman quite wise. He was a very pretty young fellow, and he brought cherries to sell in graceful little straw baskets lined with moss. So she stood in the kitchen door one morning and told him all about the great trouble that had come upon the city. He listened in great astonishment. He had never heard of it before. He lived several miles out in the country. "How did the costumer look?" he asked respectfully. He thought Violetta the most beautiful lady on earth. Then Violetta described the costumer and told him of the unavailing attempts that had been made to find him. There were a great many detectives out, constantly at work. "I know where he is," said the cherryman. "He's up in one of my cherry trees. He's been living there ever since cherries were ripe, and he won't come down." Then Violetta ran and told her father in great excitement, and he at once called a meeting of the aldermen, and in a few hours half the city was on the road to the cherryman's. He had a beautiful orchard of cherry trees, all laden with fruit. And sure enough, in one of the largest, way up amongst the topmost branches, sat the costumer, in his red velvet short clothes and his diamond knee-buckles. He looked down between the green boughs. "Good morning, friends," he shouted. The aldermen shook their gold-headed canes at him, and the people danced round the tree in a rage. Then they began to climb, but they soon found that to be impossible. As fast as they touched a hand or foot to the tree, back it flew with a jerk, exactly as if the tree pushed it. They tried a ladder, but the ladder fell back the moment it touched the tree and lay sprawling upon the ground. Finally, they brought axes and thought they could chop the tree down, costumer and all, but the wood resisted the axes as if it were iron, and only dented them, receiving no impression itself. Meanwhile, the costumer sat up in the tree, eating cherries and throwing the stones down. Finally, he stood up on a stout branch and, looking down, addressed the people. "It's of no use you're trying to accomplish anything in this way," said he. "You'd better parley. I'm willing to come to terms with you and make everything right on 2 conditions." The people grew quiet then, and the mayor stepped forward as spokesman. "Name your 2 conditions," said he, rather testily. "You own tacitly that you are the cause of all this trouble." "Well," said the costumer, reaching out for a handful of cherries, "this Christmas masquerade of yours was a beautiful idea, but you wouldn't do it every year, and your successors might not do it at all. I want those poor children to have a Christmas every year. My first condition is that every poor child in the city hangs its stocking for gifts in the city hall on every Christmas Eve and gets it filled too. I want the resolution filed and put away in the city archives." "We agree to the first condition," cried the people with one voice, without waiting for the mayor and aldermen. "The second condition," said the costumer, "is that this good young cherryman here has the mayor's daughter Violetta for his wife. He has been kind to me, letting me live in his cherry tree and eat his cherries, and I want to reward him." "We consent!" cried all the people, but the mayor, though he was so generous, was a proud man. "I will not consent to the second condition," he cried angrily. "Very well," replied the costumer, picking some more cherries. "Then your youngest daughter tends geese the rest of her life. That's all." The mayor was in great distress, but the thought of his youngest daughter being a goose girl all her life was too much for him. He gave in at last. "Now go home and take the costumes off your children," said the costumer, "and leave me in peace to eat cherries." Then the people hastened back to the city and found, to their great delight, that the costumes would come off. The pins stayed out, the buttons stayed unbuttoned, and the strings stayed untied. The children were dressed in their own proper clothes and were their own proper selves once more. The shepherdesses and the chimney sweeps came home and were washed and dressed in silks and velvets, and went to embroidering and playing lawn tennis. And the princesses and the fairies put on their own suitable dresses and went about their useful employments. There was great rejoicing in every home. Violetta thought she had never been so happy, now that her dear little sister was no longer a goose girl, but her own dainty little lady self. The resolution to provide every poor child in the city with a stocking full of gifts on Christmas was solemnly filed and deposited in the city archives and was never broken. Violetta was married to the cherryman, and all the children came to the wedding and strewed flowers in her path till her feet were quite hidden in them. The costumer had mysteriously disappeared from the cherry tree the night before, but he left at the foot some beautiful wedding presents for the bride, a silver service with a pattern of cherries engraved on it, and a set of china with cherries on it in hand painting, and a white satin robe embroidered with cherries down the front. End of The Christmas Masquerade by Mary Eleanor Wilkins. Read by Neslihan, Stamboli.
Icarus and Daedalus by Josephine Preston Peabody. This is a Librivox recording. All Librivox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit librivox.org. Among all those mortals who grew so wise that they learned the secrets of the gods, none was more cunning than Daedalus. He once built for King Minos of Crete a wonderful labyrinth of winding ways so cunningly tangled up and twisted around that once inside you could never find your way out again without a magic clue. But the king's favor veered with the wind, and one day he had his master architect imprisoned in a tower. Daedalus managed to escape from his cell, but it seemed impossible to leave the island, since every ship that came or went was well guarded by order of the king. At length, watching the seagulls in the air, the only creatures that were sure of liberty, he thought of a plan for himself and his young son Icarus, who was captive with him. Little by little he gathered a store of feathers, great and small. He fastened these together with thread, molded them in with wax, and so fashioned 2 great wings like those of a bird. When they were done, Daedalus fitted them to his own shoulders, and after 1 or 2 efforts he found that by waving his arms he could winnow the air and cleave it as a swimmer does the sea. He held himself aloft, wavered this way and that, with the wind, and at last, like a great fledgling, he learned to fly. Without delay, he fell to work on a pair of wings for the boy Icarus, and told him carefully how to use them, bidding him beware of rash adventures among the stars. "Remember," said the father, "never to fly very low or very high, for the fogs about the earth would weigh you down, but the blaze of the sun will surely melt your feathers apart if you go too near." For Icarus, these cautions went in at one ear and out by the other. Who could remember to be careful when he was to fly for the first time? Are birds careful? Not they. And not an idea remained in the boy's head but the one joy of escape. The day came, and the fair wind that was to set them free. The father bird put on his wings, and while the light urged them to be gone, he waited to see that all was well with Icarus, for the two could not fly hand in hand. Up they rose, the boy after his father. The hateful ground of Crete sank beneath them, and the country folk, who caught a glimpse of them when they were high above the tree-tops, took it for a vision of the gods, Apollo, perhaps, with Cupid after him. At first there was a terror in the joy. The wide vacancy of the air dazed them, a glance downward made their brains reel. But when a great wind filled their wings, and Icarus felt himself sustained, Like a halcyon bird in the hollow of a wave, like a child uplifted by his mother, he forgot everything in the world but joy. He forgot Crete and the other islands that he had passed over. He saw but vaguely that winged thing in the distance before him that was his father Daedalus. He longed for one draught of flight to quench the thirst of his captivity. He stretched out his arms to the sky and made towards the highest heavens. Alas for him! Warmer and warmer grew the air. Those arms that had seemed to uphold him relaxed. His wings wavered, drooped. He fluttered his young hands vainly. He was falling. And in that terror he remembered. The heat of the sun had melted the wax from his wings. The feathers were falling, one by one like snowflakes, and there was none to help. He fell like a leaf tossed down the wind, down, down, with one cry that overtook Daedalus far away. When he returned and sought high and low for the poor boy, he saw nothing but the bird-like feathers afloat on the water, and he knew that Icarus was drowned. The nearest island he named Icaria, in memory of the child, but he, in heavy grief, went to the temple of Apollo in Sicily, and there hung up his wings as an offering. Never again did he attempt to fly. End of Icarus and Daedalus by Josephine Preston Peabody. Read by Colleen McMahon.
The Story of Flying Robert by Heinrich Hoffmann. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. When the rain comes tumbling down in the country or the town, all good little girls and boys stay at home and mind their toys. Robert thought, no, when it pours, it is better out of doors. Rain it did, and in a minute Bob was in it. Here you see him, silly fellow, underneath his red umbrella. What a wind! Oh, how it whistles through the trees and flowers and thistles. It has caught his red umbrella. Now look at him, silly fellow. Up he flies, to the skies. No one heard his screams and cries. Through the clouds the rude wind bore him, and his hat flew on before him. Soon they got to such a height, they were nearly out of sight, and the hat went up so high that it nearly touched the sky. No one ever yet could tell where they stopped or where they fell. Only this one thing is plain, Bob was never seen again. End of The Story of Flying Robert by Heinrich Hoffmann. Read by AnaP.
A Little Girl to Her Flowers in Verse by Anonymous. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Daisy. This little daisy we all love, because it seems to say, I'm come to tell good girls and boys that winter's gone away. Snowdrop. There is another flower, too, I dearly love to see. The little snowdrop peeping through the frozen ground at me. Primrose. This is a pretty primrose, in shady lanes it grows, and early in the pleasant spring, in gardens, too, it blows. Daffodil. Here's a formal daffodil, though common, yet a favorite still. It seems such joyous news to bring, as harbinger of pleasant spring. May blossom. O beauteous little May blossom, I am rejoiced that you are come to smile upon us once again after the winter's snow and rain. Violet. How I do love the violet. Of all the flowers, it is my pet. How snug it hides its little head in the green leaves of its low bed. Lily of the valley. Lowly lily of the vale, To me you tell a useful tale. You say, be pretty as you will, yet modesty is lovelier still. Forget me not, no lovely flower, I'll think on thee for many an hour. If I could paint, I'd copy thee, then thou wouldst long remembered be. Tulip, the tulip with its varied hues of crimson, brown, and rich dark blues, though scentless, splendid you appear when thickly set in rich parterre. Rose, I cannot wonder that the rose is such a favorite flower. How beautiful and sweet it is with jasmine in the bower. Sunflower, I don't admire the sunflower. It rears its head so high and looks so proud and seems to say, I'm climbing to the sky. Field flowers, but oh, the fields, they are so sweet, the gardens are so gay, that I should like to run about and nosegays make all day. Greenhouse, and now we'll see the greenhouse plants. They cannot bear cold air, yet with them many wild field flowers in beauty may compare. Myrtles and geraniums. The myrtles and geraniums seem mostly to abound, and these in the warm summer months are planted in the ground. Camellia japonica. Here are the rich camellias. Oh, 'tis a splendid sight. Some variegated with soft tints, some crimson and some white. Passion flower. How gracefully the passion flower, along the trellis twining, shows symmetry with colors fair, so pleasingly combining. Oranges. The oranges and lemons too, all in their proper station, though robbed of half their native charms, invite our admiration. Conclusion. But tell me now, who made these flowers, who molded them so fair, who taught them with such rich perfume to scent the morning air, who filled their cups with drops of dew, when parched with summer's rays, who tinged their leaves with brightest hue, on which we wondering gaze? Can man such splendid dyes produce? Can he such colors blend? Can he the tendril graceful twine, or the soft branches bend? Oh no, 'tis God who reigns on high, who formed the earth and heaven, who framed each star that lights the sky, he hath to mortals given. All these and more, and should not we, frail children of mortality, with thankful hearts, each day, each night, think of his goodness infinite, and pray that gratitude may still our stubborn hearts with rapture fill. O teach us humbly to adore thee first, thee last, thee evermore. The End. End of A Little Girl to Her Flowers in Verse by Anonymous. Read by LittlePeanut.
The Story of the Man That Went Out Shooting by Heinrich Hoffmann. This is a Librivox recording. All Librivox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The Story of the Man That Went Out Shooting. This is the man that shoots the hares. This is the coat he always wears. With game bag, powder horn and gun, he's going out to have some fun. He finds it hard without a pair of spectacles to shoot the hare. The hare sits snug in leaves and grass and laughs to see the green man pass. Now, as the sun grew very hot, and he a heavy gun had got, he lay down underneath a tree and went to sleep, as you may see. And while he slept like any top, the little hare came hop, hop, hop. took gun and spectacles, and then on her hind legs went off again. The Green Man wakes and sees her place the spectacles upon her face, and now she's trying all she can to shoot the sleepy green coat man. He cries and screams and runs away. The hare runs after him all day, and hears him call out everywhere, "Help! Fire! Help! The hare! The hare!" At last he stumbled at the well, head over ears, and in he fell. The hare stopped short, took aim, and hark! Bang went the gun. She missed her mark. The poor man's wife was drinking up her coffee in her coffee cup. The gun shot cup and saucer through. "Oh dear!" cried she, "what shall I do?" There lived close by the cottage there the hare's own child, the little hare, and while she stood upon her toes, the coffee fell and burned her nose. "Oh dear!" she cried, with spoon in hand, "such fun I do not understand." End of The Man That Went Out Shooting by Heinrich Hoffmann. Read by AnaP.
Mother Goose's Bicycle Tour by M.A. Bonnell. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Awake, sweet hope, for she who shares the throne lends her own merit to make dullness bright, even as Luna to the insipid drop its light. Xanthine yellow might the aster take for hue, and emerald green the clove carnation crown, nor could fair England's rose yet learn to frown. Diadems of humble bloom and royal fleur-de-lis, rare crowns of love have crowned her long ago, and ever round her noble brow more intertwined they grow. M.A. Bonnell, July 3rd, 1901. The above lines accompanied the copy which was graciously accepted by Queen Alexandra. With honest pride the rhymer sings her ancestress renown. O proud the day that gave her birth, and proud her natal town. O may the theme the verse redeem, of meagre wit and rhyming loose, and win a kind indulgence still for Mary Susan Goose. Entered according to Act of the Parliament of Canada in the year 1900 by William Briggs at the Department of Agriculture. Dedicated by permission to Miss Liv Nansen. Dedication. Though pure the drifting snows of northern realms, dazzling the aurora of the polar girth, more stainless still thy fair and childish brow, more bright the aureole that surrounds thy birth. Oft times a nation bends its tender gaze to watch the blooming of a royal flower, child of heroic blood, genius thy heritage, the loving interest of a world thy dower. M.A.B. The Departure. Long years ago dear Mother Goose for little people made, you see, of merry rhymes and odd conceits a veritable potpourri. Some riddles hard the brain to puzzle, tales that really seemed quite true, rhymes with fun just brimming o'er, for each one something à son goût. Her fame had spread through many lands, a princess came from France to see the tree that bore the golden pear, at least such was l'on dit. But years rolled by, the dame grew old, alas, the universal fate, she found herself almost forgot, and with her goose left tête à tête. Said Mother Goose, my faithful bird, our friends neglect us, to be sure, but never mind, we'll just prepare, and take a pleasant little tour. Some evening spent in brushing up the foreign words we used to know, ere setting out upon our trip, would now be very apropos. I'll order from my milliner a brand new hat and travelling suit, and then procure some maps and guides, we'll surely need them whilst en route. 'Tis 50 years since you and I our journey took the moon to see. For fear we never should come back, we left our cards with P.P.C. What crowds there were to see us off, what merry shout and loud hurrah! Most certainly we undertook our enterprise with great éclat. and then the journey back again, and how we made the world to stare, when home we brought the wondrous news, the moon was made of fromage vert. But times are changed, and people now doubt everything they cannot see, and men are old before they're young, and even children feel ennui. No fairies now their revels hold, nor dare their merry pranks pursue, the prying eye, the searchlight's glare, have made them bid the land adieu. Should you in this material age your magic powers reveal by chance, you'd never be a moment free from scientific surveillance. Besides, to ride upon your back would outrage modern fashion's code. To go upon a two-wheeled thing is now considered à la mode. When thus the dame had spoke her mind, her banker first she went to see, then purchase made of many things, besides a flask of eau de vie. She meant to cross the channel soon, and for the future had a care. All those who travel on the sea provision make for mal de mer. 2 bicycles were ordered then from Monsieur Boone du Chambray. To tell the truth, the dame on hers looked really most distinguée. The goose all unaccustomed was to this most curious gait, but spite of this her mistress vowed she thought her manner was parfaite. I am an awkward creature, quoth the goose, as people say, but on the water rest assured you'll find me quite au fait. I know you dread the noisy ship with all its bustle and to-do, and for the horrid smell of tar you have a natural dégoût. So let us take an open boat, the voyage is not very long. I'm sure we'll reach the other side without the slightest contretemps. With courage rare the dame replied, your plan, I think, is for our wheel. We'll follow it without delay, her charming nature was facile. The noble, brave and clever bird, as one may well perceive, for new and strange adventures now, was quite on the qui vive. Adventures came too soon, alas, for on that self-same day a storm arose and they were wrecked in that short traversée. In this extremity most dire the dame takes off a wooden boot, and says, I'll buoy these precious bikes and get them sometime coûte que coûte. For string she ravels out her hose, while briny waters saturate her. Her plan will surely win success, for it is not a coup de maître. Now bind together, mistress dear, before they float away. Those oars of good Canadian pine, they are our pis aller. Your weight supported by this frame I have the power to draw, nor danger fear when you retain such admirable sang-froid. By strength of will and wing and web they reached a passing man-o'-war, and now to mother goose and bird we must say au revoir. Pussycat. Pussycat, pussycat, where have you been? I've been to London to see the Queen. Pussycat, pussycat, what saw you there? I saw a little mouse under the chair. Pussycat, pussycat, what did you do? J'ai mangé la souris tout à coup. Hi diddle diddle. Hi diddle diddle, the cat and the fiddle, the cow jumped over the moon. Regardez donc cette vache agile qui saute par-dessus la lune. Je vais au marché à l'instant, I'm going to the market now, pour acheter cette vache surprenante, to buy that remarkable cow. The well-known cat and the wonderful cow on the picture now you may see, ainsi que le chien intelligent qui avait beaucoup ri. The queens of the cards. Les dames des cartes, ils firent des tartes all on a summer's day. Les valets des cartes volèrent ces tartes and took them clean away. Les rois des cartes cherchèrent des tartes and beat the knaves full sore. Les valets des cartes rapportèrent des tartes and vowed they'd steal no more. Jack and Jill. Jack and Jill went up the hill, ensemble de l'eau ils cherchaient. Jack fell down and broke his crown, le pauvre Jill fut renversé. Up Jack got and home did trot, en colère et très pressé. Dame Jill had the job to plaster his knob, quand l'effusion de sang eut cessé. Jill came in and she did grin en voyant cet emplâtre. Her mother vowed she'd whip her next à cause de ce désastre. Old King Cole. Old King Cole was a merry old soul. Il aimait la compagnie. He called for his pipe, he called for his bowl, singing Vive la compagnie. He shared with his fiddlers the very best cheer, singing Vive la compagnie. He drank from his bowl the very best beer, singing Vive la compagnie. He never knew sorrow, he never knew fear, singing Vive la compagnie. He lived very happy, cela va sans dire, singing Vive la compagnie. There was an old woman. There was an old woman who lived in a shoe. Elle avait beaucoup d'enfants and she didn't know what to do. She gave them some broth without any bread. Elle les battait très fort and sent them to bed. Bar bar black sheep. Bar bar black sheep, as-tu de la laine? Oui, monsieur, j'en ai deux poches pleines. Une pour ma maître, une pour madame, rien pour les garçons qui versent des larmes. Old Mother Hubbard. Old Mother Hubbard went to the cupboard, des os obtenir pour son chien. But when she got there, the cupboard was bare, et là, les pauvres chèvres n'eurent rien. She went to get bread from the baker next door, but when she returned, le chien était mort. She went for a coffin with many a tear, but the dog was only joking, se met donc à rire. She went for some tripe, feeling all in a maze, but when she returned, il fumait à l'aise. I will get him some ale, Mother Hubbard, said she, but when she returned, le chien était assis. She went for some wine, her favourite to fate. Returning she found him debout sur sa tête. She went to the hatter's to get him a hat, but when she returned, il nourrissait la chatte. She went to the barber's to buy him a wig, but when she returned, il dansait une gigue. She went to the fruiterer's to buy him some fruit. Returning she found him jouant de la flûte. To buy him a coat she went to the tailor. Returning she found him à cheval sur une chèvre. She went to buy shoes, but, most strange to tell, returning she found him lisant les nouvelles. To buy him some linen she went one fine day. Returning she found le chien qui filait. She went to buy hose from old Father Drew. Returning she found him paré de son mieux. The dame made a curtsy, the dog made a bow. The dame said, your servant, le chien dit bow wow. This wonderful dog to the dame was most dear. He could read, sing and dance, et il savait écrire. Whilst living she fed him with dainties galore, and built him a tombstone quand il était mort. Where are you going to, my pretty maid? Où vas-tu, ma belle chérie? I'm going a-milking, sir, said she. Puis-je t'accompagner, belle chérie? Just as you please, kind sir, said she. Que fait ton père, ma belle chérie? My father's a farmer, sir, said she. Que fait ta mère, ma belle chérie? Wife to my father, sir, said she. Quelle est ta fortune, belle chérie? My face is my fortune, sir, said she. S'il en est ainsi, belle chérie. What do you mean, kind sir, said she. Nous n'avons jamais de fiançailles. Nobody asked you, sir, said she. When I was a bachelor. Quand j'étais un garçon, I lived by myself, and toute la viande et le fromage I put upon a shelf. Le rat et les cerises did lead me such a life, je m'en allais à Londres to get myself a wife. Les rues étant grandes, and the lanes being narrow, je dus amener mon épouse in a wheelbarrow. La brouette se cassa, my wife got a fall, la terre fout la brouette, little wife and all. Humpty Dumpty. Humpty Dumpty sat on a wall. Humpty Dumpty had a great fall. All the king's horses, et l'armée du roi, couldn't make Humpty Dumpty ce qu'il était autrefois. Taffy was a Welshman. Taffy was a Welshman. Taffy was a thief. Taffy courra chez moi and stole a leg of beef. I went to Taffy's house. Taffy wasn't at home. Taffy courait chez moi and stole a marrow bone. I went to Taffy's house. Taffy was in bed. Je pris vite le chevalier and beat him on the head. 3 wise men of St. Ives. Said this very wise man of St. Ives, I hear that potatoes have eyes. I'll shave all my head and dye my clothes red. I've a nervous objection to spies. Said the wiser, I cannot advise such a strange and uncommon disguise. But this is my plan, to eat all we can, regardless of shape or of size. Said the sagest, you don't realize that your scheme is most truly unwise. If you eat them at all, either large ones or small, every thought of your heart they'll surmise. On the man who successfully tries, or some feasible plan can devise, to grow us a kind that really is blind, we'll bestow a magnificent prize. The Frog and the Crow. Un cher petit pont, we lived on the river brink. Un corbeau noir et gaillard came there to get a drink. Come ashore, dit le corbeau à la pont. Come ashore, dit le corbeau à la pont. And you shall hear the music on yonder green hill. And you shall hear the dancers all dressed up in yellow. Je vous remercie, dit le jeune petit combi. Je vous remercie, dit le jeune petit combi. So the frog began a jumping to land. And the crow began a hopping to give her his hand. Je vous remercie, dit encore la jeune femme. Miss, you're welcome, dit le corbeau à la pompe. But where's the music on yonder green hill? And where are the dancers all dressed up in yellow? Yog. Ah! The donkeys reply. Dear Neddy, I called you long ago. Are you cold out here in the snow? I would take you down to the kitchen below, only frottez les dos. Cook is so cross I'm afraid to go. When I wanted to help her knead the dough, she sent me away and scolded so, but frottez le dos. If you are quiet and speak very low, and try to walk on your very tiptoe, we might go to the room where sisters sew, or frottez le dos. Dear old Ned, you are as hoarse as a crow, and you wobble your long ears to and fro, but whatever you mean I would like to know by frottez le dos. Farmer Brown. Farmer Brown is a sneak, and Farmer Brown's a rogue. He said he would give me £1, and he didn't, for painting his cows and Pogue. He wanted a picture of his 2 cows, Suki and coal-black Min, and then for the £1 he was to give, old Pogue must be painted in. Oh, Farmer Brown is a sneak, and Farmer Brown is a rogue. He said he would give me £1, and he didn't, for painting his cows and Pogue. I painted a picture of his 2 cows, Suki and coal-black Min, and then for the £1 he was to give, old Pogue was painted in. Oh, Farmer Brown's a sneak, and Farmer Brown is a rogue. He said he would give me £1, and he didn't, for painting his cows and Pogue. I painted a picture of his 2 cows, and sent him in the bill. Old Pogue is there, and Suki too, and Min's behind the hill. Oh, Farmer Brown is a sneak, and Farmer Brown is a rogue. He said he would give me £1, and he didn't, for painting his cows and Pogue. The Captain. I've finished my ship to the very last nail, I've painted the deck and set the sail, and now I am ready to cross the main, for I will be le capitaine. The Shoemaker. I mean to make shoes of the strongest leather, that boys may go out in any weather. I've got some wax and I know the way, so I will be le cordonnier. The cook. My cakes will be indeed a treat. I'll make them of raisins and sugar sweet. First a story and then a layer, and I will be la cuisinière. The grocer. Currants and chocolate, apples as well, the very things I would like to sell. In spite of brother Ned's facetiae, I'll be a prosperous épicier. Footnote. The exigencies of language do not omit a very good rhyme here. End of footnote. The farmer. You must have horses large and strong to drag the heavy plough along, and go to market and draw the hay. So I will be le fermier. The farmer's wife. I'd like to make butter and skim the milk, and go to church in a nice black silk, and I like the boys with curly hair. I think I will be la fermière. The tailor. The stylish suits of cloth I'll make, the eye of taste will surely take, and swain intent on wedding tour will ask, Qui est votre tailor? Mrs. Tompkins and Mr. Hopkins. Oh, here's little Mrs. Tompkins in such a frill, in such a frill. Oh, bless me if it isn't Hopkins, or dressed to kill, or dressed to kill. Good morning to you, Mrs. Tompkins, pray how'd you do, pray how'd you do? Oh, no better, Mr. Hopkins, for seeing you, for seeing you. That silly, silly Mrs. Tompkins, I'm sorry for her, I'm sorry for her. That horrid, horrid Mr. Hopkins, he's my bête noire, he's my bête noire. This very black man of Siam, ce jeune homme très noir de Siam, just asked for a slice of good ham. They said if you crave it and take affidavit, you're not a Mohammedan, Dan, you can. This lazy old man of Moselle. This lazy old man of Moselle said indeed it is all very well, but to kill flies with peas is not taking one's ease. Le jus ne vaut pas la chandelle. Ce cochon, an interesting pig. Ce cochon, an interesting pig, always wore a dress coat and a wig, but his friends looked askance and soon took a chance to ask why he wore that strange rig. This shocking old man from Cape Ray. This shocking old man from Cape Ray refused de mettre son gilet. They put him in bed and everyone said, such men must be made to obey. Peter Praddle bought a saddle. Peter Praddle bought a saddle, put it on a pump handle. When they asked him what for, he answered, Je ne sais quoi. The man from Hong Kong. This extraordinary man of Hong Kong déclarait la journée troublante. They put on his head a poultice of bread and told him his views were all wrong. The little Bohemian. Que fais-tu ici, mon petit? You must be far from home. It is not right that such a mite should be allowed to roam. What is your race and country? It never could be guessed. Your raven locks and northern bloom to different climes attest. I had a race, a long one, along the river Seine. Ma mère parle le français et elle est américaine. But I'm going to my own country, and it's 40 miles away. I'm walking very fast because I must be there today. My father knows the name of it, il m'appelle Bohème. And Victor's going with me, for I think he is the same. The king is returning to Paris. Le roi revient à Paris. La reine est très heureuse. Le roi il est le mari. La reine elle est l'épouse. Le petit maréchal. Footnote. The answer is A, the first letter of the 25 that compose the French alphabet. End of footnote. I was a little sergeant, don't you see, and I drilled my soldiers 1 and 23, and we all stepped out together in fair and stormy weather, myself and soldiers 1 and 23. I was a little captain, happy me, of my chosen band of 21, and we roamed the world together in fair and stormy weather, myself and soldiers 21. And now I am a marshal, as you see, with 64 soldiers under me, and we roam the world together in fair and stormy weather, just 25 soldiers counting me. La petite étrangère. I met a little foreigner, all on a walking tour. She smiled at me and sweetly said, "Je suis Français, monsieur." She looked so very elegant, a countess I am sure. I quickly lifted off my hat and said, "Madame, bonjour." Lay the table. Mettez donc le couvert, vite, vite, vite. Set the plates immediately, to heat, heat, heat. Jean a fait le ragoût, Anne a fait la tarte, Sue will place the chairs around with all her little heart. Tommy has a gun. Tommy has a gun, prenez garde. It has bullets made of lead, very hard. He might take you for a bear, he might take you for a hare, he might take you for a bird, prenez garde. Enigmas. Enigma. I feed all the summer, oh dear, yes. You'd better keep out of my way. I fast all the winter, oh dear, dear. In the dark and the cold I stay. Enigma. I feed all the winter, oh dear, yes. I feed both night and day. I fast all the summer, oh dear, dear. In a dark dreary place I stay. Comme il faut. This is a pretty little girl, and yet I do not know. It seems to me her manners are not quite comme il faut. The maid with eyes of blue. I met a little maiden with eyes of lovely blue. I said in my politest tone, "Ma chère, que voulez-vous?" She said, "I'd like a cherry ripe, kind sir, or even two." Oh, no one could refuse her, la fille a beau yeux doux. This studious girl of Ognance. Cette fille studieuse de l'Ognance said, "This child will, I fear, be a dunce. It's my place to see that she's taught to spell cat, so come here, little sister, at once." This lad with compassion was smitten, qui vont des environs du written. He said, "I fear that she's too young to spell cat. Oh, do please first try her with kitten." Footnote. Ognance is a college in the United States. End of footnote. Enigmas. Enigma. Connaissez-vous mon père? Connaissez-vous ma mère? Connaissez-vous mes frères, chérie? Enigma. They are hiding in the hedge, they are peeping o'er the ledge, they are seeking in the grass for me. Cassandre. À cette fenêtre, veux-tu paraître? Veux-tu mon être? Je tente. My heart is ever true, I wait, dear love, for you, at this our rendezvous, Cassandre. The Miller. This jolly fat miller works hard every day to grind up the corn in the very best way. Oh, bright is his smile and friendly his chat, and on his head always he wears a white hat. Oh, gay is his whistle and cheery his song, et sur sa tête toujours un chapeau très blond. Pourquoi? Pour se tenir la tête chaude. A king. Footnote. Un certain roi et ses cours furent obligés de laisser le capital et partir pour le Nouveau Monde à cause du tremblement de terre dès 1755. A certain king and his court were obliged to leave their capital and set out for the New World on account of an earthquake in AD 1755. End of footnote. A king in history my name is surely known. Their love my subjects my word and deed have shown. Though grieved to leave the palace of my sires, though grieved to leave the land of sunny skies, choice of evil bades me leave my tottering throne. Should I say more, my answer would be known. Louis had a sister très petite. Louis had a sister très petite. He thought that standing up she would look sweet. But her mother came and sought her, and caught her little daughter, before that he had taught her this new feat. Dick's Poem. When Benny wasn't doing something silly he was very wise. He was bigger than he was small regarding size. His head was about as large as a piece of chalk, and when he didn't run he went in a walk. Even when he walked it was on his feet, and he never was greedy when he hadn't anything to eat. The way he didn't behave himself was such a disgrace, but then he never hurt you when he bit you on your false face. The Little Nut Tree. J'avais une noisetière, nothing did it bear, mais une pusca d'argent and a golden pear. The King of France's sister came to visit me, all for the sake of my little nut tree. L'enfant terrible. I wish that grown-up gentlemen and grown-up ladies too would learn to speak as plainly as other people do. Uncle calls me some queer name, something long, I know. I cannot tell quite what it is, he always says it low. I never call him long, although he's 7 or 8 feet high. Or more perhaps, at any rate, he's longer far than I. I tried to wait in Uncle's room to ask him what it meant, but all my poor dear dollies wanted some of Uncle's scent. They're very fond of scent, you know, and so I gave them plenty, but oh dear me, I was surprised to find the bottle empty. With sister it is just the same, she says I am de trop. Whenever there is company, what's that, I'd like to know? Today, of course to help them, I just took off the string from a cunning little parcel I saw the postman bring. It was the sweetest ring, although it did not fit me quite, so I put it in my pocket to keep it out of sight. My birthday cake was getting made downstairs that very minute, and when cook looked the other way I pushed the ring down in it, and if the ring should fall to Rose I'll be so glad you know, for she is my darling sister and I really love her so. Isidore et Isabelle. Isidore et Isabelle marchent dessus une grande ombrelle. Now which is which, if you can tell, you shall have a candy and kiss as well. Every dog on the street. Every dog on the street wags its tail when we meet, mais voici une autre chose. This one I dread, for it waggles its head and fastens its teeth in my hose. This very small child on a stool had a bird that the nurse called a poule, but the gardener's son, Ben, always called it an hen, though his parents had sent him to school. Twice one are two. Twice one are two, toujours je l'ai su. Twice two are four, j'ai des boutons d'or. Twice 3 are 6, ce fait est vraiment fixe. Twice 4 are 8, la réponse est parfaite. Twice 5 are 10, les écoliers viennent. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, de l'argent dans les banques. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, j'en donnerai à mon fils. Apportez-moi du potage, apportez-moi du sel, apportez-moi une tranche de pain, and I'll do very well. The Apple Pie Party. A was an apple pie, bitten by Tom. French people call an apple une pomme. B was the bite, and I really must say, Tom was sorry that he ever took la bouchée. C was the cook. Tom was always quite safe to get goodies and tarts when he called him le chef. D was the dinner got ready that day. Dinner in France is called le dîner. E was the edge, in France called le board, of that pie trimmed with pastry to imitate cord. F was the fun the sight gave to all, in the words of the Frenchman, la gaieté folle. G was the guest Tom was late to receive. He looked very happy, a merry convive. H was for Harry, who served the pie in great glee. In France his name is pronounced Henri. I was the ivy. The pie with great care was entwined with the creeper the French call lierre. J was the juice well sweetened by the cook. He flavoured it nicely and called it le suc. K was the kitchen, so tidy and clean. In France it is always called la cuisine. L was the linen, besides each place set. In Anglo the napkin, in French serviette. M was the music, in French la musique. Aunt played for the game of lost treasure seek. N was the nurse, in France called la bonne, who brought some small cousins to share in the fun. O was the oven, in French called le four. At Xmas it bakes many pies for the poor. P for the plates, in French assiette, kept warm till the table was all nicely set. Q the quadrille, which I think came from France, the place where all children learn early to dance. R was the room where the dancing took place, in French called le salon or else la pièce. S was the sideboard for things stored away, cupboard or sideboard in French is buffet. T was the tray, in French called plateau, all laden with jellies and cream whipped like snow. U was the urchin, old cook's petite peste, for leavings and scraps she was always in quest. V was the valet, at 10 heures he came, his very small master and mistress to claim. W a wrangler, a horrid megère, just read the next line, her name will be there. X Xantippe was not at the party, I'm told, such people are always left out in the cold. Y was the year, in French called l'année, which for these happy children had just passed away. Z was the zest that appetites heartily unfailingly give to an apple pie party. End of Mother Goose's Bicycle Tour by M.A. Bonnell. Recording by Jordan Watts, Oxfordshire.
My Adventure with a Lion by Algernon Blackwood. This is a Librivox recording. All Librivox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. I once served an apprenticeship on a New York newspaper, and some of my experiences as a reporter on the Evening Smile I shall never forget. A reporter on an American newspaper is like a soldier. He is expected to obey orders implicitly, even at the risk of his life. For this reason, he is paid well, but a nervous reporter often goes out of the office with his heart in his mouth and an assignment that makes him think seriously of taking out another insurance policy on his life. One gloomy winter's morning, I got down to the office at 8 o'clock as usual, and had hardly reached my desk when the news editor, a kind man who was always giving me opportunities of distinguishing myself, came up and began to speak at once in a very mysterious voice. "Got a dandy assignment for you this morning," he said. I looked up gratefully. "I guess you carry a 6-shooter, don't you?" he asked. "You may need it this trip." "Oh," I managed to gasp. "A lion's escaped," he went on, in the quick, nervous American way of an American news editor. "Has it really?" I said, wondering what was coming next. "Jaffrey's circus came to town last night. The lion somehow got out, and they've been chasing it all night. Got it cornered in a stable at last, somewhere in East 19th Street, but it attacked and mauled a valuable horse there, and I understand is still at bay. That's all I know. Get up there as quick as you like, and get us a regular blazing story of it. You can run to a column," he added over his shoulder, as he returned to his desk to distribute the other morning assignments. "And let's have your copy down by messenger in time for the first edition." No one ever disputed with the news editor or asked unnecessary questions, but many a reporter did a lot of steady thinking when he got outside the office and safely onto the doorstep. I crammed my pocket full of paper from the big heap at the middle table and swaggered out of the room with my nose in the air as though hunting escaped lions was a little matter I attended to every day of my life, and that did not disturb me an atom. An overhead train soon rattled me up to East 19th Street, but it was some time before I found the stable where the lion awaited me, for 19th Street runs from Broadway down to the East River and is a mile or two in length and full of stables. Not far from the corner of Irving Place, however, I got onto the scent of my quarry, and I had hardly joined the group that had collected at the corner before a noise, like distant thunder, rose on the air, and every single person in the group turned tail and began to run for safety. "What's the trouble?" I asked of a man as he dashed past me. "Lion in that stable!" he shouted, pointing to the big wooden doors across the road. "Escaped from the circus, savage as they make 'em. Killed a trotting horse in there, and no one can get near it. They say it's a man-eater, too." Another roar burst out as he spoke, and the crowd that had begun to collect again scattered in an instant in all directions. There was no doubt about that sound. It was a genuine lion's roar, and it sounded deeper, I thought, than any roar I had ever heard before. But news was news, and in this case, news was bread and butter. I must get the facts, and be quick about it, too, for my copy had to be written out and in the office of the Evening Smile in time for the first edition. There was barely an hour in which to do the whole business. I forced my way through the crowd, now gathering again on the corner, and made my way across the road to where a group of men was standing not far from the stable doors. They moved about a bit when the roars came, but none of them ran, and I noticed some of them had pistols in their hands, and some heavy crowbars, and other weapons. Evidently, I judged, they were men connected with a circus, and I joined the group and explained my mission. "Well, that's right enough," said one of them. "You've got a grand newspaper story this time. Old Yellow Hair's in there, sure pop. And what's more, I don't see how we're ever going to get him out again." "The horse must be stiff by now," said another. "He was mauled half to death an hour ago." "It'd be a shame to have to shoot him," added a third, meaning the lion. "He's the best animal in the whole circus, but he is awful savage." "That's a fact," chimed in a fourth. "There's no flies on old Yellow Hair." Someone touched me on the arm and introduced himself as a reporter from the Evening Grin, a fellow worker in distress. He said he didn't like the job at all. He wanted us to go off and concoct a fake story. But I wouldn't agree to this, and it fell through, for unless all the evening papers conspire to write the same story, there's always trouble at the office when the reporters get back. Other reporters kept joining the group, and in 20 minutes from the time of my arrival on the scene, there must have been a good dozen of us. Every paper in town was represented. It was a first-class news story, and the men who were paid by space were already working hard to improve its value by getting new details, such as the animal's history and pedigree, names of previous victims, human or otherwise, the description and family history of its favorite keeper, and every other imaginable detail under the sun. "There's an empty loft above the stable," said one of the circus men, pointing to a smaller door on the story above. And before 10 minutes had passed, someone arrived with a ladder, and the string of unwilling reporters was soon seen climbing up the rungs and disappearing like rats into a hole through the door of the loft. We drew lots for places, and I came fifth. Before going up, however, I had got a messenger boy stationed in the street below to catch my copy and hurry off of it to the Evening Smile as soon as I could compose the wonderful story and throw it down to him. The reporter on an evening paper in New York has to write his stuff, as we called it, in wonderful and terrible places, and under all sorts of conditions. The only rules he must bear in mind are: get the news, and get it quick. Accuracy is a mere detail for later editions, or not at all. The loft was dark and small, and we only just managed to squeeze in. It smelt pleasantly of hay, but there was another odor besides, that no one understood at first, and that was decidedly unpleasant. Overhead were thick rafters. I think every one of us noticed these before he noticed anything else. For the instant the roar of that lion sounded up through the boards under our feet, the reporters scattered like chaff before the wind, and scuttled up into those rafters with a speed and dust and clatter I have never seen equaled. It was like sparrows flying from the sudden onslaught of a cat. Fat men, lean men, long men, short men, I never saw such a collection of news-gatherers. Smart men from the big papers, shabby fellows from the gutter press, hats flying, papers fluttering, and in less than a second after the roar was heard, there was not a solitary figure to be seen on the floor. Every single man had gone aloft. We all came down again when the roar ceased, and with subsequent roars we got a little more accustomed to the shaking of the boards under our feet. But the first time at such close quarters, with only a shaky wooden roof between us and Old Yellowhair, was no joke, and we all behaved naturally and without pose or affectation, and ran for safety, or rather climbed for it. There was a trapdoor in the floor through which, I suppose, the hay was passed down to the horses under normal circumstances. One by one, we crawled on all fours to this trapdoor and peered through. The scene below I can see to this day. As soon as one's eyes got a little accustomed to the gloom, the outline of the stalls became first visible. Then a human figure seated on the top of an old refrigerator, with a pistol in one hand, pointed at a corner opposite, came into view. Then another man, seated astride the division between the stalls, could be seen, and last but not least, I saw the dark mass on the floor in the far corner, where the dead horse lay mangled, and the monster of a lion sprawled across his carcass, with great paws outstretched and shining eyes. From time to time, the man on the icebox fired his pistol, and every time he did this, the lion roared, and the reporters flew and climbed aloft. The trapdoors was never occupied a single second after the roar began, and as the number of persons in the loft increased, and the thin wooden floor began to bend and shake, a number of these adventurous news-gatherers remained aloft, and never put foot to ground. Braver reporters threw their copy out of the door to the messenger boys below, and every time this feat was accomplished, the crowd, safely watching on the corners opposite, cheered and clapped their hands. A steady stream of writing dropped from that loft door and poured all the morning into the offices of the evening newspapers, while the morning newspapermen sat quietly and looked down, knowing that they could write up their own account later from the reports in the evening sheets. The men in the stable below, occupying positions of great peril, were, of course, connected with the traveling circus. We shouted down questions to them, but more often got a pistol shot instead of a voice by way of reply. Where all those bullets went to was a matter for anxious speculation amongst us, and the roaring of the lion combined with the reports of the six-shooter to keep us fairly dancing on that wooden floor as if we were practicing a cakewalk. A sound of cheering from the crowd outside, swelling momentarily as the neighborhood awoke to the situation, brought us with a rush to the top of the ladder. "It's the strong man!" cried several voices. "The strong man of the circus! He'll fix up the lion quick enough. Give him a chance!" A huge man, who rightly enough proved to be the performing strong man of the circus, was seen making his way through the crowd, asking questions as he went. A pathway opened up for him as if by magic, and, carrying a mighty iron crowbar, he reached the foot of the ladder and began to climb up. Thrilled by the sight of this monster with a determined-looking jaw, a dozen men rushed forward to hold the bottom of the ladder while he ascended. But when he was about halfway up, the lion was inconsiderate enough to give forth a most terrifying roar, with the immediate result that the men holding the ladder turned tail with one accord and fled. The ladder slipped a few inches, and the ascending Samson, crowbar and all, very neatly came to the ground with a crash. Fortunately, however, he just managed to grab the ledge of the door, and a dozen reporters seized him by the shoulders and dragged him safe, but a trifle undignified, into the loft. Talking very loud and referring to the lion with a richness of epithets I have never heard equaled before or since, he crossed the floor and began to squeeze through the hole into the dangerous region below. In a moment he was hanging with legs dangling, and a second later had dropped heavily into a pile of hay underneath him. We lowered the crowbar to him, breathless with admiration, and then a strange thing happened. For, while the lion roared and the pistols banged and we reporters tumbled over each other to get a glimpse of the attack of the lion on the strong man. Or vice versa. Lo! A voice below shouted to close the trap, and the same instant a board from below shot across the opening and completely obliterated our view. "We'll have to fake that part of the fight," said a reporter. "Must all agree on the same yarn." The sounds from below prevented the details being agreed upon just at that moment, for such a hullabaloo as we then heard is simply indescribable. Shooting, lion roaring, strong man shouting, crowbar clanging, and the sound of breaking wood and heavy bodies falling. Outside the crowd heard it too, and remained absolutely silent. Most of them, indeed, had vanished. Every minute they expected to see the doors burst open and the enraged animal rush out with a strong man between his jaws, and their silence was accordingly explained by their absence. At least half of the reporters were still among the rafters when the trapdoor shot back in the floor, and a voice cried breathlessly that the strong man had caged the lion. It was indeed a thrilling moment. We clambered down the ladder and out into the street just in time to see the great doors open and a procession emerge that was worth all the traveling circuses in the world put together to see. First came the trainer, with a pistol in either hand. Following him was the man with a small crowbar who had sat on the division between the stalls. Then came a great iron cage, which had been in the stable all the time, but a little out of our line of vision in a dark corner, so that no one had observed it. In this cage lay the huge exhausted lion, panting, on its side, with lather dripping from its great jaws. And on the top of the cage, seated tailor-wise, dressed in a very loud check ulster, and wearing a bell-shaped opera hat on the side of his head, was the proud figure of the victorious strong man. The expression on his face was worth painting, but it is wholly beyond me to describe it. Such exultation and glorious pride was worthy of the mightiest gladiator that ever fought in an arena. His long curly hair, shining with oil, escaped in disorder from his marvelously shaped top hat, and the massive crowbar that had brought him his hard-won victory stood upright on one end, grasped in his gigantic hand. He smiled round on the gathering crowd, and the procession moved proudly up the streets till within half an hour the people following and cheering must have numbered many thousands. We reporters rushed off to our various offices, and the streets were soon afterwards lively with newspaper boys shouting the news and waving sheets of terrible and alarming headlines about the escaped lion and its fearful ravages, and the strong man who had captured it after a ghastly battle for his life. Next day, the morning papers did not publish a solitary line about the great event, but in the advertising columns of every newspaper appeared the prospectus of the traveling circus just come to town, and in particularly bold type the public were told to be sure and see Yellowhair, the savage, man-eating lion that had escaped the day before and killed a valuable horse in a private stable where it had been chased by the terrified keepers, and, in the paragraph below, the details followed of the wonderful strong man, Samson, who had caught and caged the lion single-handed, armed only with a crowbar. It was the best advertisement a circus ever had, and most of it was not paid for. "Guess you knew it was all a fake?" queried the news editor next morning, as he gave me the usual assignment. It was my first week on an American paper, and I stared at him, waiting for the rest. "That lion hasn't a tooth in its head. They dragged in a dead horse in the night. You wrote a good story, though. Cleaned your pistol yet?" End of My Adventure with a Lion by Algernon Blackwood. Read by Rachel.
Ozma and the Little Wizard by L. Frank Baum. This is a Librivox recording. All Librivox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Ozma and the Little Wizard. Once upon a time there lived in the beautiful Emerald City, which lies in the centre of the fairyland of Oz, a lovely girl called Princess Ozma, who was ruler of all that country. And among those who served this girlish ruler and lived in a cosy suite of rooms in her splendid palace was a little withered old man known as the Wizard of Oz. This little wizard could do a good many queer things in magic, but he was a kind man, with merry twinkling eyes and a sweet smile. So instead of fearing him because of his magic, everybody loved him. Now Ozma was very anxious that all her people who inhabited the pleasant land of Oz should be happy and contented, and therefore she decided one morning to make a journey to all parts of the country, that she might discover if anything was amiss, or anyone discontented, or if there was any wrong that ought to be righted. She asked the little wizard to accompany her, and he was glad to go. "Shall I take my bag of magic tools with me?" he asked.
"Of course," said Ozma. "We may need a lot of magic before we return, for we are going into strange corners of the land, where we may meet with unknown creatures and dangerous adventures."
So the wizard took his bag of magic tools, and the two left the Emerald City and wandered over the country for many days. At last reaching a place far up in the mountains which neither of them had ever visited before. Stopping one morning at a cottage built beside the rocky path which led into a pretty valley beyond, Ozma asked a man,
"Are you happy? Have you any complaints to make of your lot?"
And the man replied, "We are happy except for 3 mischievous imps that live in yonder valley, and often come here to annoy us. If your highness would only drive away those imps, I and my family would be very happy and very grateful to you."
"Who are these bad imps?"
inquired the girl ruler. "One is named Olite, and one Udent, and one Urtinant, and they have no respect for anyone or anything. If strangers pass through the valley, the imps jeer at them and make horrid faces and call names, and often they push travellers out of the path or throw stones at them. Whenever Imp Polite or Impudent or Impertinent comes here to bother us, I and my family run into the house and lock all the doors and windows, and we dare not venture out again till the imps have gone away." Princess Ozma was grieved to hear this report, and the little wizard shook his head gravely and said the naughty imps deserved to be punished. They told the good man they would see what could be done to protect him, and at once entered the valley to seek the dwelling place of the 3 mischievous creatures. Before long, they came upon 3 caves hollowed from the rocks, and in front of each cave squatted a queer little dwarf. Ozma and the wizard paused to examine them and found them well-shaped, strong and lively. They had big round ears, flat noses, and wide grinning mouths, and their jet black hair came to points on top of their heads, much resembling horns. Their clothing fitted snugly to their bodies and limbs, and the imps were so small in size that at first Ozma did not consider them at all dangerous. But one of them suddenly reached out a hand and caught the dress of the princess, jerking it so sharply that she nearly fell down, and a moment later another imp pushed the little wizard so hard that he bumped against Ozma, and both unexpectedly sat down upon the ground. At this, the imps laughed boisterously, and began running around in a circle and kicking dust upon the royal princess, who cried in a sharp voice, "Wizard, do your duty!" The wizard promptly obeyed. Without rising from the ground, he opened his bag, got the tools he required, and muttered a magic spell. Instantly, the 3 imps became 3 bushes, of a thorny, stubby kind, with their roots in the ground. As the bushes were at first motionless, perhaps through surprise at their sudden transformation, the wizard and the princess found time to rise from the ground and brush the dust off their pretty clothes. Then Ozma turned to the bushes and said, "The unhappy lot you now endure, my poor imps, is due entirely to your naughty actions. You can no longer annoy harmless travellers, and you must remain ugly bushes covered with sharp thorns until you repent of your bad ways and promise to be good imps." "They can't help being good now, your highness," said the wizard, who was very much pleased with his work, "and the safest plan will be to allow them always to remain bushes." But something must have been wrong with the wizard's magic, or the creatures had magic of their own, for no sooner were the words spoken than the bushes began to move. At first they only waved their branches at the girl and the little man, but pretty soon they began to slide over the ground, their roots dragging through the earth. And one pushed itself against the wizard and pricked him so sharply with its thorns that he cried out, "Ouch!" and started to run away. Ozma followed, for the other bushes were trying to stick their thorns into her legs, and one actually got so near her that it tore a great rent in her beautiful dress. The girl princess could run, however, and she followed the fleeing wizard until he tumbled headfirst over a log and rolled upon the ground. Then she sprang behind a tree and shouted, "Quick, transform them into something else." The wizard heard, but he was much confused by his fall. Grabbing from his bag the first magical tool he could find, he transformed the bushes into 3 white pigs. That astonished the imps. In the shape of pigs, fat, roly-poly and cute, they scampered off a little distance and sat down to think about their new condition. Ozma drew a long breath, and coming from behind the tree, she said, "That is much better, Wiz, for such pigs as these must be quite harmless. No one need now fear the mischievous imps." "I intended to transform them into mice," replied the wizard, "but in my excitement I worked the wrong magic. However, unless the horrid creatures behave themselves hereafter, they are liable to be killed and eaten. They would make good chops, sausages, or roasts." But the imps were now angry, and had no intention of behaving. As Ozma and the little wizard turned to resume their journey, the 3 pigs rushed forward, dashing between their legs and tripping them up, so that both lost their balance and toppled over, clinging to one another. As the wizard tried to get up, he was tripped again and fell across the back of the 3rd pig, which carried him on a run far down the valley until it dumped the little man in the river. Ozma had been sprawled upon the ground, but found she wasn't hurt. So she picked herself up and ran to the assistance of the wizard, reaching him just as he was crawling out of the river, gasping for breath and dripping with water. The girl could not help laughing at his woeful appearance, but he had no sooner wiped the wet from his eyes than one of the impish pigs tripped him again and sent him into the river for a second bath. The pigs tried to trip Ozma too, but she ran around a stump and so managed to keep out of their way. So the wizard scrambled out of the water again and picked up a sharp stick to defend himself. Then he mumbled a magic mutter which instantly dried his clothes, after which he hurried to assist Ozma. The pigs were afraid of the sharp stick and kept away from it. "This won't do," said the princess. "We have accomplished nothing, for the pig imps would annoy travellers as much as the real imps. Transform them into something else, Wiz." The wizard took time to think. Then he transformed the white pigs into 3 blue doves. "Doves," said he, "are the most harmless thing in the world." But scarcely had he spoken when the doves flew at them and tried to peck out their eyes. When they endeavoured to shield their eyes with their hands, 2 of the doves bit the wizard's fingers, and another caught the pretty pink ear of the princess in its bill and gave it such a cruel tweak that she cried out in pain and threw her skirt over her head. "These birds are worse than pigs, wizard," she called to her companion. Nothing is harmless that is animated by impotent anger or impertinent mischief. You must transform the imps into something that is not alive." The wizard was pretty busy just then driving off the birds, but he managed to open his bag of magic and find a charm which instantly transformed the doves into 3 buttons. As they fell to the ground, he picked them up and smiled with satisfaction. The tin button was Imp Light, the brass button was Imp Udent, and the lead button was Imp Ertinent. These buttons the wizard placed in a little box, which he put in his jacket pocket. "Now," said he, "the imps can't annoy travellers, for we shall carry them back with us to the Emerald City." "But we dare not use the buttons," said Ozma, smiling once more now that the danger was over. "Why not?" asked the wizard. "I intended to sew them upon my coat and watch them carefully. The spirits of the imps are still in the buttons, and after a time they will repent and be sorry for their naughtiness. Then they will decide to be very good in the future. When they feel that way, the tin button will turn to silver and the brass to gold, while the lead button will become aluminium. I shall then restore them to their proper forms, changing their names to pretty names instead of the ugly ones they used to bear. Thereafter, the 3 imps will become good citizens of the land of Oz, and I think you will find they will prove faithful subjects of our beloved Princess Ozma." "Ah, that is magic well worthwhile," exclaimed Ozma, well pleased. "There is no doubt, my friend, but that you are a very clever wizard." End of Ozma and the Little Wizard by L. Frank Baum. Read by Craig Franklin.
The Panjandrum Picture Book by Randolph Caldickett. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by Chad Horner. Come lassies and lads, come lassies and lads, give leave of your dads, and away to the Maypole, hey! For every he has got him a she, with a minstrel standing by. For Willie has gotten his Jill, and Johnny has gotten his Joan, to jig it, jig it, jig it, jig it, jig it up and down. Strike up, says Wat, agreed, says Kate, and I prithee, fiddler, play. Content, says Hodge, and so says Madge, for this is a holiday. Then every man did put his hat off to his lass, and every girl did curtsy, curtsy, curtsy on the grass. Begin, says Hall, aye, aye, says Moll, we'll lead up Pakinston's pound. No, no, says Noll, and so says Doll, we'll first have cylinders round. Then every man began to foot it round about, and every girl did jet it, jet it, jet it in and out. You're right, says Dick, not I, says Nick, the fiddler played it false. 'Tis true, says Hugh, and so says Sue, and so says nimble Alice. The fiddler then began to play the tune again, and every girl did trip it, trip it, trip it to the men. Then after an hour they went to a bower, and played for ale and cakes, and kisses too, until they were due, the lasses held the stakes. The girls did then begin to quarrel with the men, and bid them take their kisses back and give them their own again. Now there they did stay the whole of the day, and tired the fiddler quite, with singing and playing without any paying, from morning until night. They told the fiddler then they'd pay him for his play, and each a 2p, 2p, 2p gave him and went away. Good night, says Harry, good night, says Mary, good night, says Dolly to John, good night, says Sue to her sweetheart Hugh, good night, says everyone. Some walked and some did run, some loitered on the way, and bound themselves by kisses 12 to meet the next holiday. Ride a cock horse to Banbury Cross, ride a cock horse to Banbury Cross, to see a fine lady get on a white horse, with rings on her fingers and bells on her toes. She shall have music wherever she goes. A farmer went trotting upon his grey mare, bumpety bumpety bump, with his daughter behind him, so rosy and fair, lumpety lumpety lump. A raven cried croak, and they all tumbled down, bumpety bumpety bump. The mare broke her knees, and the farmer his crown, lumpet lumpety lump. The mischievous raven flew laughing away, bumpety bumpety bump, and vowed he would serve them the same the next day, lumpety lumpety lump. An Elegy on the Glory of Her Sex, Mrs. Mary Blaze, by Dr. Oliver Goldsmith. Good people all with one accord lament for Madam Blaze, who never wanted a good word from those who spoke her praise. The needy seldom passed her door and always found her kind, and freely lent to all the poor who left a pledge behind. She strove the neighbourhood to please with manners wondrous winning, and never followed wicked ways, unless when she was sinning. At church in silks and satins new, with hop of monstrous size, she never slumbered in her pew, but when she shut her eyes, her love was sought, I do aver, by 20 beaux and more. The king himself has followed her, when she has walked before. But now her wealth and finery fled, her hangers-on cut short all. The doctors found, when she was dead, her last disorder mortal. Let us lament in sorrow sore, for Kent Street well may say, that had she lived a 12-month more, she had not died today. The great Panjandrum himself. So she went into the garden to cut a cabbage leaf, to make an apple pie, and at the same time a great she-bear, coming down the street, pops its head into the shop. What, no soap? So he died, and she very imprudently married the barber. And there were present the Piccaninnies, and the Job Lilies, and the Garulies, and the great Panjandrum himself, with a little round button at top, and they all fell to playing the game of catch as catch can, till the gunpowder ran out at the heels of their boots. End of the Panjandrum picture book by Randolph Caldicott.
The Story of Augustus, Who Would Not Have Any Soup, by Heinrich Hoffmann. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Augustus was a chubby lad. Fat, ruddy cheeks Augustus had, and everybody saw with joy the plump and hearty, healthy boy. He ate and drank as he was told, and never let his soup get cold. But one day, one cold winter's day, he screamed out, "Take the soup away! Oh, take the nasty soup away! I won't have any soup today." Next day, now look, the picture shows, now lank and lean Augustus grows. Yet though he feels so weak and ill, the naughty fellow cries out still, "Not any soup for me, I say! Oh, take the nasty soup away! I won't have any soup today." The third day comes, oh what a sin, to make himself so pale and thin. Yet when the soup is put on table, he screams as loud as he is able, "Not any soup for me, I say! Oh, take the nasty soup away! I won't have any soup today." Look at him, now the fourth day's come, he scarcely weighs a sugar plum. He's like a little bit of thread, and on the fifth day he was dead. End of the Story of Augustus, Who Would Not Have Any Soup, by Heinrich Hoffmann, read by AnaP.
The Story of the Little Black Mingo, by Helen Bannerman. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by Chad Horner. Once upon a time there was a little black girl, and her name was Little Black Mingo. She had no father and mother, so she had to live with a horrid cross old woman called Black Noggy, who used to scold her every day, and sometimes beat her with a stick, even though she had done nothing naughty. One day Black Noggy called her and said, "Take this chatty down to the river and fill it with water, and come back as fast as you can, quick now." So Little Black Mingo took the chatty and ran down to the river as fast as she could, and began to fill it with water, when crack, bang, a horrible big mugger poked its nose up through the bottom of the chatty and said, "Ha ha, Little Mingo, I'm going to eat you up." Little Mingo Black did not say anything. She turned and ran away as fast as ever she could, and the mugger ran after her, but the broken chatty round his neck caught his paws, so he could not overtake her. But when she got back to Black Noggy and told her how the mugger had broken the chatty. Black Noggy was fearfully angry. "You naughty girl," she said. "You have broken the chatty yourself. I have a good mind to beat you." And if she had not been in such a hurry for the water, she would have beaten her. Then she went and fetched the great big chatty that the Dobby used to boil the clothes in. "Take this," said she, "and mind you don't break it, or I will beat you." "But I can't carry that when it is full of water," said Little Black Mingo. "You must go twice, and bring it half full each time," said Black Noggy. So Little Black Mingo took the Dobby's great big chatty and started again to go to the river. But first she went to a little bank above the river and peeped up and down to see if she could see the old mugger anywhere. But she could not see him, for he was hiding under the very bank she was standing on, and though his tail stuck out a little, she never saw him at all. She would have liked to run home, but she was too much afraid that Black Noggy would beat her. So Little Black Mingo crept down to the river and began to fill the big chatty with water. And while she was filling it, the mugger came creepily, softly down behind her and caught her by the tail, saying, "Aha, Little Black Mingo, now I've got you." And Little Black Mingo said, "Oh, please don't eat me up, great big mugger. What will you give me if I don't eat you up?" said the mugger. But Little Black Mingo was so poor she had nothing to give. So the mugger caught her in his great cruel mouth and swam away with her to an island in the middle of the river and set her down beside a huge pile of eggs. "Those are my eggs," said he. "Tomorrow a little mugger will come out of each, and then we will have a great feast, and we will eat you up." Then he waddled off to catch fish for himself and left Little Black Mingo along beside the big pile of eggs. The Little Black Mingo sat down on a big stone and hid her face in her hands and cried bitterly because she couldn't swim and she didn't know how to get away. Presently she heard a queer little squeaky noise that sounded like squeak, squeak, squeak. "Oh, Little Black Mingo, help me or I shall be drowned." She got up and looked to see what was calling, and she saw a bush coming floating down the river with something wriggling and scrambling about in it. And as it came near she saw that it was a mongoose that was in the bush. So she waded out as far as she could and caught hold of the bush and pulled it in, and the poor mongoose crawled up her arm on to her shoulder and she carried him to shore. When they got to shore the mongoose shook himself and Little Black Mingo wrung out her petticoat, and so they both very soon got dry. The mongoose then began to poke about for something to eat, and very soon he found a great pile of mugger's eggs. "Oh, joy!" said he. "What's this?" "Those are mugger's eggs," said Little Black Mingo. "I'm not afraid of muggers," said the mongoose, and he sat down and began to crack the eggs and eat the little muggers as they came out, and he threw the shells into the water so that the old mugger should not see that anyone had been eating them. But he was careless, and he left one eggshell on the edge, and he was hungry, and he ate so many that the pile got much smaller, and when the old mugger came back he saw at once that someone had been meddling with them. So he ran to Little Black Mingo and said, "How dare you eat my eggs?" "Indeed, indeed, I didn't," said Little Black Mingo. "Then who could it have been?" said the mugger. And he ran back to the eggs as fast as he could, and sure enough when he got back he found the mongoose had eaten a whole lot more. Then he said to himself, "I must stay beside my eggs till they are hatched into little muggers, or the mongoose will eat them all." So he curled himself into a ring round the eggs and went to sleep. But while he was asleep the mongoose came to eat some more of the eggs, and ate as many as he wanted. And when the mugger woke this time, oh, what a rage he was in, for there were only 6 eggs left. He roared so loud that all the little muggers inside the shells gnashed their teeth and tried to roar too. And he said, "I know what I'll do. I'll fetch Little Black Mingo's big chatty and cover my eggs with that. Then the mongoose won't be able to get at them." So he swam across the shore and fetched the Dobby's big chatty and covered the eggs with it. "Now you wicked little mongoose, come and eat my eggs if you can," said he, and he went off quite proud and happy. By and by the mongoose came back, and he was terribly disappointed when he found the eggs all covered with the big chatty. So he ran off to Little Black Mingo and asked her to help him, and Little Black Mingo came and took the big chatty off the eggs, and the mongoose ate them every one. "Now," said he, "there will be no little muggers to make a feast of for tomorrow." "No," said Little Black Mingo, "but the mugger will eat me all by himself, I'm afraid." "No, he won't," said the mongoose, "for he will sail away together with the big chatty before he comes back." So he climbed on to the edge of the chatty, and Little Black Mingo pushed the chatty out into the water, and then she clambered into it and paddled with her two hands as hard as she could, and the big chatty just sailed beautifully. So they got across safely, and Little Black Mingo filled the chatty half full of water and took it to her head, and they went up the bank together. And when the mugger came back and found only empty eggshells, he was fearfully angry. He roared and he raged, and he howled and he yelled, till the whole island shook, and his tears ran down his cheeks and pattered on the sand like rain. So he started to chase Little Black Mingo and the mongoose, and he swam across the river as fast as he could, and when he was halfway across he saw them landing, and as he landed they hurried over the first bridge. So he raced after them, but they ran, and just before he caught them they got into the house and banged the door in his face. Then they shut all the windows, so he could not get in anywhere. "All right," said he, "you will have to come out sometime, and then I will catch you both and eat you up." So he hid behind the back of the house and waited. Now Black Noggy was just coming home from the bazaar with a tin of kerosene on her head and a box of matches in her hand, and when he saw her the mugger rushed out and gobbled her up, kerosene tin, matches and all. When Black Noggy found herself in the mugger's dark inside, she wanted to see where she was, so she felt for the matchbox and took out a match and lit it, but the mugger's teeth had made holes in the kerosene tin, so that the flame of the match caught the kerosene, and bang! The kerosene exploded and blew the old mugger and Black Noggy into little bits. At the fearful noise, Little Black Mingo and the mongoose came running out, and there they found Black Noggy and the old mugger all blown to bits. So Little Black Mingo and the mongoose got the nice little house for their very own, and there they lived happy ever after, and Little Black Mingo got the mugger's head for her seat, and the mongoose got Black Noggy's handkerchief for his. But he was so wee he used to put it on the mugger's nose, and there they sat and had their tea every evening. End of the story of Little Black Mingo by Helen Bannerman. The Tale of Johnny Town Mouse by Beatrix Porter. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by Chad Horner. Johnny Town Mouse was born in a cupboard. Timmy Willie was born in a garden. Timmy Willie was a little country mouse who went to town by mistake in a hamper. The gardener sent vegetables to town once a week by carrier. He packed them in a big hamper. The gardener left the hamper by the garden gate so that the carrier could pick it up when he passed. Timmy Willie crept in through a hole in the wicker work, and after eating some peas, Timmy Willie fell fast asleep. He awoke in a fright while the hamper was being lifted into the carrier's cart. Then there was a jolting and a clattering of horses' feet. Other packages were thrown in for miles and miles. Jolt, 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 and Timmy Willie trembled amongst the jumbled up vegetables. At last the cart stopped at a house where the hamper was taken out, carried in and set down. The cook gave the carrier 6 pence, the back door banged, and the cart rumbled away. But there was no quiet. There seemed to be hundreds of carts passing. Dogs barked, boys whistled in the street, the cook laughed, the parlour maid ran up and downstairs, and a canary sang like a steam engine. Timmy Willie, who had lived all his life in a garden, was almost frightened to death. Presently the cook opened the hamper and began to unpack the vegetables. Out sprang the terrified Timmy Willie. Up jumped the cook on a chair, exclaiming, "A mouse! A mouse! Call the cat! Fetch me the poker, Sarah!" Timmy Willie did not wait for Sarah with the poker. He rushed along the skirting board till he came to a little hole, and in he popped. He dropped half a foot and crashed into the middle of a mouse dinner party, breaking 3 glasses. "Who in the world is this?" inquired Johnny Town Mouse, but after the first exclamation of surprise he instantly recovered his manners. With the utmost politeness he introduced Timmy Willie to 9 other mice, all with long tails and white neckties. Timmy Willie's own tale was insignificant. Johnny Town Mouse and his friends noticed it, but they were too well bred to make personal remarks. Only one of them asked Timmy Willie if he had ever been in a trap. The dinner was of 8 courses, not much of anything, but truly elegant. All the dishes were unknown to Timmy Willie, who would have been a little afraid of tasting them, only he was very hungry and very anxious to behave with company manners. The continual noise upstairs made him so nervous that he dropped a plate. "Never mind, they don't belong to us," said Johnny. "Why don't those youngsters come back with the dessert?" It should be explained that 2 young mice who were waiting on the others went skirmishing upstairs to the kitchen between courses. Several times they had come tumbling in, squeaking and laughing. Timmy Willie learnt with horror that they were being chased by the cat. His appetite failed, he felt faint. "Try some jelly," said Johnny Town Mouse. "No, would you rather go to bed? I will show you a most comfortable soft pillow." The soft pillow had a hole in it. Johnny Town Mouse quite honestly recommended it as the best bed, kept exclusively for visitors. But the sofa smelt of cat. Timmy Willie preferred to spend a miserable night under the fender. It was just the same next day. An excellent breakfast was provided for mice accustomed to eat bacon, but Timmy Willie had been reared on roots and salad. Johnny Town Mouse and his friends racketed about under the floors, and came boldly out all over the house in the evening. One particularly loud crash had been caused by Sarah tumbling downstairs with the tea tray. There were crumbs and sugar and smears of jam to be collected, in spite of the cat. Timmy Willie longed to be at home in his peaceful nest in a sunny bank. The food disagreed with him. The noise prevented him from sleeping. In a few days he grew so thin that Johnny Town Mouse noticed it and questioned him. He listened to Timmy Willie's story and inquired about the garden. "It sounds rather a dull place. What do you do when it rains?" "When it rains, I sit in my little sandy burrow and shell corn and seeds from my autumn store. I peep out at the throstles and blackbirds on the lawn, and my friend Cock Robin. And when the sun comes out again, you should see my garden and the flowers, roses and pinks and pansies. No noise except the birds and bees and the lambs in the meadows." "There goes the cat again!" exclaimed Johnny Town Mouse, when they had taken refuge in the coal cellar. He resumed the conversation. "I confess I am a little disappointed. We have endeavoured to entertain you, Timothy William." "Oh yes, yes, you have been most kind, but I do feel so ill," said Timmy Willie. "It may be that your teeth and digestion are unaccustomed to our food. Perhaps it might be wiser for you to return in the hamper." "Oh, oh!" cried Timmy Willie. "Why, of course, for the matter of that, we could have sent you back last week," said Johnny rather huffily. "Did you not know that the hamper goes back empty on Saturdays?" So Timmy Willie said good-bye to his new friends and hid in the hamper with a crumb of cake and a withered cabbage leaf, and after much jolting he was set down safely in his own garden. Sometimes on Saturdays he went to look at the hamper lying by the gate, but he knew better than to get in again, and nobody got out, though Johnny Town Mouse had half promised to visit. The winter passed, the sun came out again. Timmy Willie sat by his burrow, warming his little fur coat and sniffing the smell of violets and spring grass. He had nearly forgotten his visit to town, when up the sandy path all spick and span with a brown leather bag came Johnny Town Mouse. Timmy Willie received him with open arms. "You have come at the best of all the year. We will have herb pudding and sit in the sun." "It is a little damp," said Johnny Town Mouse, who was carrying his tail under his arm out of the mud. "What is that fearful noise?" He started violently. "That?" said Timmy Willie. "That is only a cow. I will beg a little milk. They are quite harmless unless they happen to lie down upon you. How are all our friends?" Johnny's account was rather middling. He explained why he was paying his visit so early in the season. The family had gone to the seaside for Easter. The cook was doing spring cleaning on board wages, with particular instructions to clear out the mice. There were 4 kittens, and the cat had killed the canary. "They say we did it, but I know better," said Johnny Town Mouse. "Whatever is that fearful racket?" "That is only the lawn mower. I will fetch some of the grass clippings presently to make your bed. I am sure you had better settle in the country, Johnny. We shall see by Tuesday week. The hamper is stopped while they are at the seaside. I am sure you will never want to live in town again, said Timmy Willie. But he had. He went back to the very next hamper of vegetables. He said it was too quiet. One place suits one person, another place suits another person. For my part, I prefer to live in the country, like Timmy Willie. End of the tale of Johnny Town Mouse by Beatrix Porter.
The Real Princess by Hans Christian Andersen. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings can be found in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The Real Princess. There once was a prince who wished to marry a princess, but then she must be a real princess. He travelled all over the world in hopes of finding such a lady, but there was always something wrong. Princesses he found in plenty, but whether they were real princesses, it was impossible for him to decide. For now one thing, now another, seemed to him not quite right about the ladies. At last he returned to his palace, quite cast down, because he wished so much to have a real princess for his wife. One evening a fearful tempest arose. It thundered and lightened, and the rain poured down from the sky in torrents. Besides, it was as dark as pitch. All at once there was heard a violent knocking at the door, and the old king, the prince's father, went out himself to open it. It was a princess who was standing outside the door. What with the rain and the wind, she was in sad condition. The water trickled down from her hair, and her clothes clung to her body. She said she was a real princess. Ah, we shall soon see that, thought the old queen mother. However, she said not a word of what she was going to do, but went quietly into the bedroom, took all the bedclothes off the bed, and put 3 little peas on the bedstand. She then laid 20 mattresses, one upon another, over the 3 peas, and put 20 feather beds over the mattresses. Upon this bed the princess was to pass the night. The next morning she was asked how she had slept. "Oh, very badly indeed," she replied. "I have scarcely closed my eyes the whole night through. I do not know what was in my bed, but I had something hard under me, and I am all over black and blue. It has hurt me so much." Now it was plain that the lady must be a real princess, since she had been able to feel the 3 little peas through the 20 mattresses and 20 feather beds. None but a real princess could have had such a delicate sense of feeling. The prince accordingly made her his wife, being now convinced that he had found a real princess. The 3 peas were however put into the cabinet of curiosities, where they are still to be seen, provided they are not lost. Wasn't this a lady of real delicacy? End of The Real Princess by Hans Christian Andersen. Read by AnaP.